Welcome back to the show, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, General Holland Hallamad Dog Smith of the Marine Corps. Today I'd like to do a top 10 list of the biggest egos in the war. While certainly I have been accused of being fat-headed, I do not hold a candle to anyone on this list. So first off, let's get some parameters straight. I'm going to knock out two of the biggest names in the war period, and for good reason, I think. Hitler and Stalin, because of their cults of personality surrounding themselves and the ability to have anyone that disagree with them killed, they have an unfair advantage in the ego department. So I'm going to eliminate them from the list. Other honorable mentions I've left out: Alan Brooke, Bomber Harris, Stilwell, Chennault, Zhukov, and Khrushchev. And the latter two because they're under the crony system of favoritism and toe the line under Stalin's regime. Yeah, they might have had giant egos, but they had to play the game in order just to live and not be decapitated, executed by bullet, or sent to the gulag. It's a tough line to toe. So they're off the list. But anyway, here we go. And some of these will surprise you for, where I put them in a list of big-headedness. And I don't think my number one will be any real shock to anyone. And the rest can be arguable for placement in numeric order. But here we go. Number 10, General George S. Patton. While certainly he had a big head, he also had to knuckle under to the superiors above him and toe the line. He had a certain amount of fame in the war, was not shy from promoting himself to the press as a war hero. He wanted to make his mark in the war and knew that was his chance. His glory from World War I had faded and wanted to reassert himself in the pantheon of American military heroes. And certainly he had a giant head. But I think overall he had to constrain himself because of the slapping incidents in Sicily, and his war kind of took a sideways turn after that. Even though he came back to prominence in Normandy, he never did shine as brightly as he did in North Africa and the Sicilian campaigns. And to go along with this, I would suggest a brief bio of Patton by Martin Bloomison, the man behind the legend. I think this does a good job of conveying his life and his ego. And if you really want to be a glutton for punishment, you can read War as I Knew It, his personal memoir of the war years. I've read this a couple times, and honestly, it's really just change your socks, and change your socks. He must mention that 24 times as the key to being a good infantryman. So that's number 10. Number 9, it's kind of a co-award here, to Douglas Bader and Adolf Gallant. Now, these are direct combatants, and I kind of struggled for direct combatants other than these two with giant egos that have stood up over the years. Reach for the Sky is the bio/memoir by Paul Brickhill of Douglas Bader. I recommend that. And in all fairness to Douglas Bader, if you had lost your legs in a flying accident in the RAF and had the moxie and the temerity and the physical strength and mental willpower to come back from that, get yourself some artificial legs, and convince the military establishment you could still fly and be a fighter pilot, yeah, you'd have a giant ego too. And he wasn't shy about it. It never stopped. I think until the glory faded after the war. I think he kind of faded away after the war, his personality, and lived a quiet country life. But during the war, certainly his head could fill several rooms at once. Very, very egotistical. And a good example of that is in the Robert Stanford Tuck memoir. They went head-to-head at loggerheads over tactics, strategy, and even equipment for Spitfires during the early years of the war. And when they were cooped up in the same Stalag together, Tuck gives you the distinct impression that he was just a pain in the ass to be around, period. And as for Adolf Gallant, he epitomizes the spirit of the fighter pilot, the aggressive hunter, and with absolute disregard for the enemies he kills, has no concerns about murdering people in midair. He just saw it as the thrill of the hunt, and it's what I'm supposed to be doing. Remember, this is the guy who would stand up to Goering and to a certain degree Hitler, toe-to-toe, no real deference. He certainly had the spine to do that. But he also had a cigarette lighter installed for himself in his personal ME-19, or cigar lighter. If that's not arrogance, I don't know what is. So I put them as big-headed, top 10 general in the direct combatant department. Number 8, I'm going to lump some German generals here together. Certainly, they had like 1,000 general officers during the war, and not all of them were gigantic egos, but certainly several of them stand out as thinking the world is just not big enough for them. And as my poster children here, I have Walter Model, Erich Manstein, Heinz Guderian, Rommel, and Hermann Goering. These guys had ginormous egos. Manstein thought he should be elevated to Commander-in-Chief, Eastern Front, knocking Hitler out of the chair, and argued with him over for several months before finally being fired. That takes some moxie and some high opinions of yourself that you can do the job for the entire Eastern Front by yourself. Massive ego. Guderian, of course, yeah, pretty much fashions the Panzer Corps arm of the German Wehrmacht single-handedly in the 30s. He's held for leather on the Eastern Front until Moscow 41, where he gets dinged around a little bit, gets that ego bruised, but comes back as Inspector General of the Panzer Corps and then eventually Chief of General Staff to Hitler. So yeah, the ego's there. And ego was the one person that he couldn't bowl over. He just never could impress upon Hitler that he was more intelligent than Hitler himself and had all the answers. Goering, of course, man, the uniforms say it himself, right? Rommel, up until Al Alamein, and when he got kicked out of North Africa and he was afflicted by ailments from the desert climate, he was never the same after that. But up until he gets kicked out of North Africa, certainly his ego's top dog stuff. Who did I miss in there? Model. Well, yeah, the firemen of the Eastern Front, and up until the time where he finally gets surrounded in the rear pocket and puts a bullet in his head, he certainly had a big ego. Number 7, Admiral Ernest J. King. Man, this guy, he kind of warped the entire American war effort around his perceived correct notion of when and where America should fight. In every strategy conference you come across, there's Ernest King saying, no, we're full up with what we can do for Europe. I understand the policy is Germany first, but what we're actually going to do is put Japan first, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Short of being relieved by Roosevelt, who was not going to make that move because Ernest King was A, effective, B, effective, and C, effective. Short of relieving him, there's nothing you could do about it. He simply had the naval establishment wrapped around his pinky and could wrench the entire direction of the war into the Pacific. So he kind of starved the European theater of naval resources, not to the degree that some people accuse him of for the anti-submarine effort early in the war, but yeah, certainly he changed the focus of where America was going to make its main effort for the first 2 years. Number 6, General Mark Clark. Yeah, the man who you can only take a photograph from a particular side because that was his best side, had a gaggle of press corps around him at all times, positive articles all the time. I'm so great. I'm this, that, and the other. Had a rough start at Salerno and kind of lost his nerve there when the situation got really sticky. But after that, his ego rebounded, and he became the primo guy in the theater, especially with Monty shuffling off to England. There was nobody there to constrain his ego, and he warped the Italian campaign around his desire to capture Rome, and arguably really screwed up by going for Rome instead of surrounding the German forces when he had the chance at that time. He had broken them, could have surrounded them and eliminated them in a pincer movement, and decided that capturing Rome for glory was far more important to him than anything he could do for the war effort. And therefore, we're going to Rome. That's a big head. And no one said no. No one above him said, you know what, this is a bad idea. Amazing. Now, on the redemption side, in the Korean War, he is kind of credited with coming in and salvaging the situation and being a level-headed commander with a lot of good ideas. So maybe he got his fill of the glory in World War II, felt he had made his reputation, was secure in the Pantheon, and moved on to being an actually effective commander. I don't know. But certainly anything you read in Italy, Sicily, no, not Sicily, but Italy, anything you read about the campaign in Italy or the Anzio campaign, the capture of Rome, is going to revolve around Mark Clark to an inordinate degree. Number 5, Charles de Gaulle. This guy would eventually survive 9 or 10 assassination attempts on his life when he was Premier of France after the war. Before the war, he was such a pain in the ass. He was worse to talk to than Stalin in Churchill's eyes. He couldn't stand him. And Churchill, of course, is no wilting flower there. He could stand up with some pretty big egos, but Charles de Gaulle was so arrogant, he couldn't handle him. Couldn't stand to be around him. He demanded everything, had nothing to give, wasn't interested in giving anything. And anything you refused him, it was a grievous offense to Charles de Gaulle's tender sensibilities. This man had the temerity to meet with Stalin in 1944 and pretty much talked Stalin to a standstill about post-war settlements and France's place in the occupation scheme of Germany. Like, yeah, I'm going to be there. I am one of the major combatants. I deserve an occupation zone for what France has suffered, and you can go to hell if you don't like it. And by the way, we're not going to curry any favor with the Communist Party of France after the war either. Eat it. And he got away with it. Even Stalin couldn't bend him to his will. That says something about his big head. Now, I don't have anything directly related book-wise to de Gaulle, and even though I've got a giant bio of him, I haven't read it yet. And he's kind of a tertiary character to me in the war. I'm not really France-centered for any reason. And let's face it, he really did not directly command troops in the war. He was setting himself up to be president of France. So, yeah, in that respect, I haven't paid much attention to him. But anything relating to the campaign in Western Europe in 1944-1945, de Gaulle will pop up. And to a certain degree, after the Battle of France, when he's trying to establish the Free French military force in a political spot for himself in the scheme of things and make himself the legitimate power in France after the surrender of Vichy. So yeah, Charles de Gaulle, can't ignore him. He's kind of a 600-pound elephant in the corner there. You're not going to ignore him. Let's see. Moving on to the top 4 here. Monty. Man, this guy. Monty's a classic narcissist who never understood he was stomping on other people's feelings and intelligence, and his manners were just absolutely awful. He never got it. He is the epitome of the British Empire, right? Swagger stick and all, his personal caravan jaunting about the battlefield, going to bed at 9 o'clock every night, having a strict routine, don't interrupt me with anything till the morning. His press conferences are notorious. His power struggle with Eisenhower to be ground commander is notorious and well documented ad nauseum. For Monty, I mean, the thing with Patton and Sicily is more on Patton's side than Monty's, but it's there. He had to be promoted to field marshal to shut him up and get him to cooperate and be part of the team. It was a sticky situation where nobody felt they could relieve him of command for his mouth because of the prestige factor and the signal it would send to Stalin as well as the Nazis. But he was a hard man to live with in command of anything bigger than a Jeep train. But Battle of the Generals by Martin Bloomison will take you through some of the early stuff. That's just the Falaise Pocket and the Normandy campaign, but you get a good feel for that. I'd also say the Robin Nealon's book about the fight for the Rhine or Battle for the Rhine in the fall of 1944 is pretty much a showcase of Monty's arrogance. And amazingly, he was such a big head and had such a force of personality that even though he designed and screwed up the Battle of Arnhem, he still doesn't really take the blame for it 80 years later. That's amazing. Number 3 is Sirocco Yamamoto. Yeah, I'm going to put him in there. Yeah, big head. He is often remarked as being super intelligent and very canny and knowledgeable of America because he was posted there and toured the country and understood our industrial capacity. Okay, same man who said, we're going to attack Pearl Harbor or I resign. In our drive to the south for the southern resource area, we don't actually have to attack America. We can really skip the Philippines. We don't really need it. We want the stuff over there. And attacking the United States is probably the dumbest thing we could do because they're going to eventually swamp us with military industrial capacity. But nevertheless, we're going to do it because I want to do it. And if we don't do it, I quit, which will send a horrible signal to the rest of the military, maybe force a cabinet resignation to form a new government on the eve of war. It was not deemed politically possible to survive that kind of firepower Yamamoto commanded in the military political establishment. It worked out to a degree, but 6 months later, he repeats the performance for the Midway operation, insisting that this is the war winner and any other operation is simply inconceivable if I don't get my way. And if you don't agree to me with the Midway operation, with command of the entire combined fleet and every ship at my disposal, I quit. Again, the victor of Pearl Harbor here cannot be seen to resign as a show of no confidence in the war effort, and ultimately upon the emperor, kind of reflection on the emperor too. That was perceived as we just can't afford this. We'll have to knuckle under him, even though everybody's nervous. The war gaming showed it to be a bad plan. The general staff, the naval general staff, thought it was a bad plan. They still went ahead and knuckled under him. That's a huge ego to pull off. And also shows you why a renowned poker player probably ought not to be in charge of military forces. Gambling doesn't pay off in war. Yamamoto. Now, a lot of people say, you're going overboard with that, but no, I think, give some deeper thought. I think it's justified. All right, number 2, Winston Churchill. How can we not have Winnie on the list? How could we not? I don't think I even need to say anything, but I will. Anything involving British policy can cover Churchill's ego. But I'm going to go back to World War II Behind Closed Doors by Lawrence Reeves for you on this. He's in the thick of it through and through, far more than FDR. Churchill was really crucial to running the European war and policy and strategy ideas. And again, he fizzled out after the Italian campaign when the compass needle swung around to the United States being the premier partner in the partnership. And they were going to drive the boat after that because they got the resources and the money and the manpower. Political clout shifted enormously after the Mediterranean campaign fizzled out. He kind of lost his way, wandered around the Med for a while, notorious public drunkard there for a while. But then he recovered himself once we actually got established in Normandy and finished up strongly at the end of the war. Churchill, can't ignore the guy. No matter what you may think of his imperialist tendencies and his Victorian mindset, he's just a giant of the 20th century. Absolutely. You cannot step around the man. You couldn't step around that man's head without walking a few hundred miles. It was so big. So number 2, Churchill. So number 1, who could possibly top Churchill? Dun, 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 dun. Douglas MacArthur. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, got to be MacArthur. I'm so big and important. I'm a field marshal of the Philippines, and I'm going to warp my section of the Pacific War around my desire to go back to the Philippines, regardless of what everyone else in the American and Allied camp thought about it and its military value to the war. It can be argued that the Philippines was an unnecessary stepping stone, with the submarine blockade having pretty much shut off the southern resource area. Establishing bases in the Philippines was kind of pointless to defeating Japan. Nimitz and King wanted to go for Formosa, but FDR ruled in favor of the Philippines as a political ploy to get him reelected and eliminate MacArthur as a political opponent for the presidency in '44. It was strictly a public opinion decision for a particular campaign, and that's just democracy at its worst right there. But it's what happened. But can you argue against liberating the Philippine people from the yoke of the Japanese, which was one of MacArthur's prime stated motivations? I don't know. It was probably a good idea to make them not suffer another 9 months under the Japanese. You're going to take casualties somewhere, no matter where you attack. Formosa was a bit of a problem as being a bridge too far logistically, and also the Japanese being able to pull in reinforcements from the mainland of China to complicate the measure. They did so in the Philippines also, but that's a much harder stretch to reach from Japan to the Philippines than it would be from China to Formosa. So it's kind of a 50-50. We're going to go one of these two places. Which one is better? Navy guys probably wouldn't agree because the kamikaze effort off the Philippines was absolutely brutal for them. Militarily, I don't know. But yeah, MacArthur, you know, when you've had a career like his, where you got a Medal of Honor for running away, captain of the Olympic team, World War I hero, your father was a Civil War hero with a Medal of Honor winner, head of West Point, chief of staff of the Army. Yeah, you've got the biggest ego in the world. He tops everybody for World War II. Sorry, that's sorry, not sorry. That's how I feel about it. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. And by the way, thanks for all the recent subscribers. My channel grows very slowly, but I do appreciate the increased viewership very much. Thank you very much. And until next time, happy reading.